Our first story takes place on a fateful Halloween night in a small town, where a group of friends decided to throw an epic Halloween party at an abandoned mansion on the outskirts. The mansion, long rumoured to be haunted, had a dark and twisted history. Stories swirled of the unsolved disappearances that plagued the mansion decades ago. But for these friends, the eerie reputation made it the perfect setting for a night of spooky fun. The mansion was decked out in Halloween decorations, DIY projects, with cobwebs draped over the old chandeliers, flickering jack-o'-lanterns lining the entryway, and eerie Halloween sounds playing in the background. Guests arrived in their best Halloween costumes, eager to celebrate the night in true Halloween fashion. The atmosphere was electric, with Halloween games in full swing and spooky Halloween music setting the tone. As the night wore on, the mood began to shift. A cold, unnatural chill swept through the mansion, sending shivers down the spines of the guests. The once lively Halloween night was now enveloped in an eerie silence. The Halloween soundtrack from 1978 that had been playing suddenly distorted, as if the music was being warped by some unseen force. The air grew thick with tension, and the guests began to feel an overwhelming sense of unease. Emma, one of the guests and an avid fan of true scary stories and podcast horror recaps, had a bad feeling about the mansion from the start. She had heard the tales of what had happened in this place, terrifying Reddit horror stories that made her skin crawl, but nothing could have prepared her for what was about to happen. As the clock struck midnight, the lights in the mansion flickered and then went out completely, plunging the party into darkness. The Halloween playlist was replaced by the sound of footsteps echoing through the empty halls. The once lively partygoers huddled together, their laughter replaced by nervous whispers. In the suffocating darkness, the only sound was the distant, haunting whisper of a ghostly wind. Suddenly, from the depths of the mansion, a low, guttural whisper began to resonate, soft at first but growing louder, more insistent. The whisper seemed to come from every direction, filling the air with a sense of impending doom. The guests, gripped by fear, looked around frantically, but there was no one there. The mansion's grand entryway, once adorned with cheerful Halloween decorations, now seemed ominous. The flickering jack-o'-lanterns cast twisted, grotesque shadows on the walls. Emma felt a chill run down her spine as she caught sight of a shadowy figure moving just beyond the reach of the dying candlelight. It was tall, its face obscured in darkness, but she could feel its eyes on her, cold, unforgiving, and filled with malevolence. Without warning, the doors to the mansion slammed shut with a thunderous crash, trapping the guests inside. The windows shattered, and a howling wind tore through the mansion, carrying with it the sounds of ghostly laughter and distant screams. The lights flickered back on, but the once friendly glow was now harsh and unnatural, casting long, eerie shadows that danced across the walls. The guests screamed and tried to flee, but the shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, its twisted grin growing wider as it moved closer. It reached out with cold, bony hands, and the air grew thick with the stench of decay. The mansion seemed to come alive, its walls closing in on the terrified guests as they were cornered by the malevolent force that had claimed the mansion as its own. The last thing Emma saw before the darkness consumed her was the figure's hollow eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The next morning, the mansion was found empty, its once vibrant Halloween decorations torn down and scattered across the floor. The guests were gone, vanished, without a trace. The mansion was abandoned once more, becoming the subject of countless dark web horror stories and paranormal investigations. Our second story takes us to a quiet suburban neighborhood where Halloween night was always a beloved event. Children dressed in Halloween costumes would roam the streets, collecting candy and enjoying the festive atmosphere. Every house was decorated with Halloween decorations DIY projects, and the air was filled with the sounds of Halloween music and Halloween ASMR. But one year, something strange happened. Halloween simply disappeared. The evening started off like any other Halloween night. The streets were filled with children's laughter, and the Halloween theme song played from houses adorned with jack-o'-lanterns and spooky decorations. But as the sun set and darkness fell, something felt off. The once bustling streets grew eerily quiet, and the cheerful Halloween sounds faded into an unnatural silence. The Thompson family, known for their extravagant Halloween decorations and enthusiasm for the holiday, noticed that their daughter, Lily, had not returned from trick-or-treating. She had been excited all week about her Halloween costume and had planned to go out with her friends. But now it was well past her curfew, and there was no sign of her. As the hours ticked by, the Thompsons grew increasingly worried. They searched the neighborhood, calling out her name, but there was no response. The streets, once filled with the joy of Halloween, were now shrouded in an unsettling quiet. The air grew colder, and the once familiar houses now seemed strange and foreboding. As they walked down the darkened streets, the horror ambient grew thicker. The once friendly Halloween decorations now cast eerie shadows, and the wind carried with it a faint whisper, an ominous sound that seemed to echo through the empty streets. The Halloween lights flickered, and the jack-o'-lanterns seemed to leer at them with twisted grins. Suddenly the Thompsons saw a figure standing at the end of the street. It was tall and shadowy, its face obscured by darkness. The figure held a small, flickering light that cast an eerie glow on the surrounding houses. The parents called out to the figure, hoping it was Lily, but there was no response. Instead, the figure began to move toward them, its steps slow and deliberate. As the figure drew closer, the horror ambience intensified. The parents could feel a sense of dread building within them, a growing fear that something terrible was about to happen. The figure stopped just a few feet away, and the flickering light revealed its face, a twisted, ghostly visage with hollow eyes and a mouth that gaped open in a silent scream. The parents tried to run, but their feet felt like they were sinking into the ground. The figure reached out with cold, bony hands, and the last thing they saw before the darkness consumed them was the figure's twisted grin, a smile filled with malice and despair. The next morning, the neighborhood was eerily quiet. The Halloween decorations were still up, but the streets were empty, and there was no sign of the Thompsons or their daughter. The entire neighborhood seemed to have forgotten about Halloween, as if it had never happened. The case became the subject of numerous dark web horror stories and paranormal files, but no one could explain what had happened. Halloween in that neighborhood was never the same, and the residents learned to fear the night when the holiday simply disappeared. Our final story takes place in a small town where Halloween was always celebrated with a haunted house event. The haunted house was a popular attraction, drawing people from all over to experience the thrills and scares. But one year, the event organizers decided to add a new twist, a Halloween game that would test the bravery of those who dared to enter. The game was simple. Participants would enter the haunted house alone, armed only with a flashlight. They would have to navigate through the dark, eerie corridors, avoiding traps and scares until they reached the end. The prize for completing the game was a large sum of money, and many were eager to take on the challenge. Among the participants was Jake, a fan of Batman, The Long Halloween, and scary true stories. He had heard the stories about the haunted house, but he was confident in his ability to handle whatever scares awaited him. As he entered the house, the horror ambient was immediate. The air was thick with a sense of dread, and the darkness seemed to press in on him from all sides. The house was filled with Halloween decorations, cobwebs, and eerie Halloween sounds. The flashlight flickered as Jake made his way through the maze-like corridors, his heart pounding in his chest. The Halloween witch pot smoke machine mistmaker added an extra layer of fog, making it difficult to see what lay ahead. As he ventured deeper into the house, the horror ambience grew thicker, the air grew colder, and the sound of faint whispers echoed through the darkened halls. Jake felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end as he realized he wasn't alone. The shadows seemed to move on their own, twisting and writhing like living things. Suddenly, Jake heard a noise behind him, a faint, rustling sound that sent a chill down his spine. He turned, but there was nothing there. The flashlight flickered again, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The whispers grew louder, turning into a chorus of voices, all speaking at once, filling the house with a cacophony of sound. Jake's heart raced as he realized he was being watched. He could feel the presence of something malevolent lurking in the darkness, its eyes fixed on him. The horror ambience was suffocating, the air thick with fear. He tried to move forward, but his feet felt heavy, as if they were being pulled into the floor. The next moment he saw a figure standing at the end of the corridor. It was tall, its form barely visible in the dim light. The figure seemed to be watching him, its presence suffocating, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. Jake tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure began to move toward him, its movements slow and deliberate, like something out of a nightmare. The figure reached out with long, clawed hands, and the last thing Jake saw before the darkness consumed him was the figure's twisted grin, a smile filled with pure evil. The next morning, the haunted house was found empty, the decorations torn down, and the corridors filled with strange symbols. Jake was never found, and the Halloween game was cancelled indefinitely. The haunted house became the subject of countless dark web horror stories and paranormal investigations, but no one could explain what had happened. The town never held another Halloween event in the house, and it remains a place of fear and mystery to this day.